This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for Liner Notes. Liner Notes is an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and Liner Notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabanzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals with occasional special topic episodes featuring yours truly. A glimpse into the minds of my varied guests, all intended to help independent music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Welcome to another episode. It is a pleasure to be on your speakers or earbuds or Alexa, wherever, whatever you're doing. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you. Hey, I want to mention a couple things before getting to my guest today. One of them is a big thank you to George Brandow, who made a donation to the Unstarving Musician, helping us keep the lights on. George is a founding member drummer for a South San Francisco Bay Area band called Chrome Deluxe. They play an amazing brand of blues that you can dance to, and George is a hell of a drummer. You can probably catch him sitting in with any number of blues players in the San Francisco Bay Area. Visit their website at chromedeluxeband.com to find out where they play next. Great guy, great friend, great musician. Thanks, George. We appreciate you. Speaking of donating, if you do love what I do here and you want to help us keep the lights on, you can visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the many ways of showing your love and support. There's a tip jar there now. You can just click tip, be done. Your love equals support. We appreciate it so much. All right, let's see. Oh, I want to tell you about some new music as well. So the founder of Jib Records has a new release out by an artist named Cleo Alexandra. She has a reimagined track of the popular song Who Can It Be Now? That's a Men at Work tune, as I recall. And you can find it on Bandcamp. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but basically you can look for jibdigital.bandcamp.com to see their latest release by Cleo Alexandra. Again, I will put a link in the show notes for you. Let's talk about my guest now. He is Garry Peterson, the founding drummer member of the Guess Who. He's been making music for over 6 decades. Garry also performed with Bachman Turner Overdrive during their support of Van Halen's 5150 tour, a show I actually got to see many years ago in Dallas. He has to his credit 15 albums that have charted on the Billboard 200, 14 singles that have charted on Billboard's Top 40, including 2 number ones, also 3 gold singles and 3 gold albums as certified by RIAA. Garry is featured on the brand new Guess Who album called Plein D Amour. It's a great sounding album and the packaging is amazing. We talk about both of those things. And he's planning to record on yet another forthcoming album by the Guess Who. He's still touring with them. I told him he's practically a Rolling Stone with all his years in the business, and he reminded me he got his start around the same time as the Stones. We talk about his long career, the new album by the Guess Who, the history of the band, his drum gear, facts versus fiction of the Guess Who, advice for young players, and more. I really enjoyed talking to Garry. Such a nice guy. We had a little bit of connectivity issues that resulted in slightly lower audio quality than I normally like to provide you with, but I am confident you will still get a great deal of enjoyment and value from our conversation. You can hear the new album by The Guess Who, featuring Garry Peterson on drums at theguesswho.com and music services everywhere. Here is me talking to Garry Peterson of The Guess Who. Gary, it's great to see you. You're looking good, man.
Well, I feel pretty good for 78 years old, and still being on the road is a blessing from God. So
you're practically a Rolling Stone.
Well, I come from basically the same era.
Yeah.
Our band, the original band, started in 1962, So that's close to them.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. When your name came on my radar from Aaron, I got all excited because I remember when I was a kid, I had a Best of Guess Who cassette tape in my car. Used to listen to that a lot, so I really
Yeah.
really appreciate the work you did. I'm a little bit younger than you, but yeah,
Mm,
I was driving around as probably like a 16-year-old listening to that cassette tape. So yeah, and I have older brothers, so they were excited for me. So it's definitely a pleasure to have you on here.
great. That's good. I'm very honored to be with you to talk about the band in general.
Thank you. Are you from Winnipeg?
I was born in Winnipeg in 1945, and I lived there till 1980. Yeah,
What was it like growing up there?
it was a great place to grow up. It was really a hotbed of arts. The Royal Winnipeg Ballet is worldwide known. When we were growing up playing music in Winnipeg, every high school, every community club, they had live dances, and there was no records, there were live bands. It was quite, I mean, that's where Neil Young made his bones.
Ah, I should know that, but hey, are you guys close in age, you and Neil?
Yes, I may be a year or so. My brother, on a weekend at our house, my father was a drummer, and he'd go play. He'd be getting ready on Friday and Saturday to go and play in his jazz nightclub gig. I'd be getting ready to go and play with the band, which would become the Guess Who, Chad Allen and the Silvertones. And Neil Young would be knocking on the door to pick up my brother to play with him on a weekend.
What did your brother play?
Drums.
Wow, that's cool. I was about to ask you if you guys crossed paths.
Yeah, Neil had a band in Winnipeg called Neil Young and the Squires. If you
Wow.
look at his history, that my brother was in that band. So
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations on the brand new record, Plein D Amour. I hope I said that right. I was listening to it today, and the artwork is beautiful, and it sounds great.
yeah, Ionis did that artwork, which is he's a famous guy. I just got I ordered a record, couple of vinyls in the mail, and they just came, and I was stunned when I opened them up. It's such a beautiful package.
Do you have one you
Uh,
can show me by chance, close by?
yeah, hang on, I'll grab it. Here it is. So this is the album,
So cool,
and
man. That's old school. I love it.
not only that, but the vinyl is
Oh, wow.
the vinyl is spectacular.
That is the most beautiful vinyl I've ever seen. For those who are listening, and I'm not going to do a video for this, but the album covers kind of reminiscent of Yes album artwork from back in the day.
Yeah, Ionis. I'm not sure. I'm always mispronouncing his name, but he's so famous. He did for many people, including Yes. And I can't remember who in our organization thought about approaching him, and he listened to the album. He loved the album, and I think that's how it came about. And I'm so very proud at this stage of my career to still be looking at album and saying, this might be one of the best things we ever did. That's what you want to happen in your career. So I'm thrilled, and we're actually, I just finished listening to one of our new cuts. We're already gathering the next album.
Oh, sweet. Well, you should be proud. It sounds amazing. I'll be sure to let listeners know. And I was going to finish talking about the actual physical copy you showed me. The vinyl is just a multicolored masterpiece, and I'll have to put pictures of it on the.
I have another one here where I haven't opened yet. There's one with green vinyl. I showed you the purple splash. There's another one that has a green kind of motif. So there's actually two vinyls, and of course the traditional black vinyl. It is also out. So it's kind of, you've got three choices in vinyl.
That's cool. Well, I hope you guys sell a ton of them. I know the record business, the vinyl business has changed dramatically, but they're coming back in vogue, so that's nice.
Well, the record business, I mean, um, we're a product of radio, the old radio record business. And this is all so new to us. How do you get a record out? How do you promote a record? How do you get the record into people's hands? Because it's nothing like the old days where we had radio stations everywhere and they just played the record over and over and over again. So it's kind of a new thing to us. However, recording for us is recording. We went to a studio up in the wilds of Ontario, north of Toronto, called Villa Sound. It was a house, and we were there for 8 to 10 days, and just immersed ourselves in the music. And even the video from The King was shot in the backyard in between takes when we were recording. So it's quite a generic product, kind of reminiscent to us of the way we did things in the old days.
Wow, that's cool. You guys, I noticed, have a lot of tour dates. I assume you're playing them all, and I just want to ask, how are you doing it, man, after all these years?
Well, again, I mean, I know there's a lot of people online say, well, Garry wasn't there at this gig. Um, I do at my age have to have things done like surgeries on the rotator cuffs and knee replacements, and I have to have cataracts done, and so for the most part, I'm there, except when the physical need arises to get something done, so I can continue.
Well, that's amazing and totally understandable. I'm sure you remember the band Foreigner. Saw them long ago when they were the original lineup, and then I saw them many years later with basically one guy and some heavyweights from other bands. But I had read that what is his name? Mick something, the founding guitarist. But sometimes he doesn't tour with the band, which is weird, because he is kind of the band.
It's a different world that we live in today. Some people, we've had several guitar players pass away, and there's people like Randy and Burton who go on to do whatever they want to do with their own careers. They obviously didn't want to stay in the Guess Who, because we had two reunions, one in the mid 80s and one from 1999 to 2003. And there was every opportunity to keep the band together, and they're not here, and I still am.
Yeah.
So and that's their decisions. They know what they want to do with their careers. It's just that sometimes the fans are so disappointed, they take it out on the new band, which has nothing to do with that. All
Yeah.
we're doing is continuing the great legacy of the band. And oh, by the way, unlike many other entities, we're trying to add new legacy
Yeah,
to
sure.
the band. Otherwise, we would just go out and play the records. I mean, the old records. I mean, we do that, but half the show right now is half of the new album on stage.
That's cool. And well, you know what? You're right in differentiating yourselves from some of the other guys that may come from your era that are doing things, because I know that sometimes it's a name and maybe not even a single original member just playing tribute to old works, and you guys are still doing stuff, and the album again is just pretty amazing.
Pretty well, I played on every album.
I read that. That's amazing. So that's like how many albums?
Well, I don't even know. I know there were 14 on RCA. There were three in Canada. I played on one BTO live album, and I played on several of Burton Cummings's solo albums. So
By the way, I am almost certain I might even have a ticket stub, and I wasn't aware of it until I read it on the Guess Who website, that I was at the Van Halen 5150 tour in which BTO opened, and in Dallas.
that's so funny. I broke my ankle at that show. The day before we did a charity softball game and running to first base, I snapped my ankle when I came down on the first base.
Oh no. Did you say you did play that show or you did not?
Actually, I didn't. I was there, but my drum roadie played the show. He's a drummer.
Oh wow, that is so interesting. I'm sorry to hear
Yeah,
that I didn't actually hear you, but you were there. That's great.
yeah. There, and sitting in the dressing room, kind of feeling sorry for myself that I was so stupid that what I did, trying to be a kid of 16 or 15 and playing baseball. The mind is willing, but not the body.
Look at you now. So, the funny thing I remember about that show, BTO was great and it was just a great overall show, but I remember Randy doing a big guitar solo and I'm like, wow, he's hammering on the guitar like Eddie Van Halen. Clearly he's like, I didn't know if he was paying tribute or having fun or
Well,
both.
that comes from the old Guess Who. We used to do friends of mine off our We'd Feel Soul album, and Randy would play the guitar with a drumstick.
Oh,
That's what he was doing.
it was
He
pretty
was
cool.
he was hitting the strings with a drumstick. So
That is pretty cool.
Mhm.
I'm a drummer. I don't know if they told you that, but so I wanted to ask
No,
you.
had no clue.
Yeah, I've been playing since I was 13 years old, which was many, many, many years ago. But I wanted to ask you what you play in the studio when you did this last album.
I'm a DW endorser,
Nice.
so I use DW drums, and I use Sabian, which is a Canadian brand now, although it really is Zildjian under a different name.
I'm a Sabian guy. I didn't even realize they were Canadian now.
Well, here's what happened is that everybody in the Zildjian family is given the formula for the symbols at birth, and then two of the brothers had a falling out, and
Hmm.
one of the guy took his formula and went to Meductic, uh, New Brunswick, and that's where he started the factory. And I met Sally Zildjian in Vancouver when I was living there, and that's how I got tied up. She said, "Why don't you try our symbols?" And really, I mean, they've gone separate ways now because it's been long enough that they would tweak the formulas and stuff like that. But Sabian comes from Sally, S.A., and Brian, Bian, Brian
Oh,
Zildjian.
that's cool. I didn't know that. And are they heirs of the family or
Yeah, children. Yeah,
nice?
yeah,
That's very cool. Yeah, well, the kit sounds amazing. You play amazing too, so it's really fun to listen to it.
yeah, yeah.
So, all right, so I had this sort of fact or fiction section I wanted to ask you about because I got some of this stuff off the internet, and we can't believe it everything we read there. But
Well, there's a I have a book that I'm trying to finish in between recording albums, videos, and promoting their new record and playing live dates. And I will dispel quite a few misconceptions in the book.
okay, cool. All right, well, tell me if this one's a fact or fiction, and I'll just sort of generalize here. But I had read about the name that um, it stems from a single called "Shaken All Over," which was
Right?
Chad Allen and the Expressions, but that the label credited it to Guess Who with a question mark as a publicity stunt, and then eventually the name just kind of stuck with you guys because that's what people started calling you. Is that accurate?
That is correct. We were signed to Quality Records in Canada. When we put Shaken All Over out, it became number one in Canada, and then Scepter Records picked it up in New York City. George Struth in Toronto, who was the head of Quality Records at the time, I believe it was his idea because it was the time when most radio stations were playing all British invasion stuff. We didn't think a Canadian record would get played, just out of the box. So he said, "Why don't we put Guess Who question mark on the label?"
Yeah.
So after that, it became top 20 hit in the United States. Do you think it would have been a wise branding thing to say, "Oh no, it's not Guess Who question mark, it's Chad Allen and the Expressions"? I, so it was a done deal. That was it. Personally, I don't know what the rest of the guy. I kind of hated the name because it was so close to the Who, and people would say, "Oh, you're just perjuring that name, trying to cash in," and it really wasn't. It was an accident.
I love it. That's a good story. And
Mm.
then I'd also read, and I was just curious about this. It may be sort of a side note in your history, or maybe something big, but I was just curious about how, if it did happen, how it affected the career of the band or your career. But I'd read that in '67 you were hired as house band for a CBS radio show called The Swingers, and as a house band for a TV show called Let's Go, which was hosted by former bandmate Chad Allen. So first, is that accurate? And B, did it have any sort of impact on you guys?
The actual name of the show was called Let's Go. Every night it was from a different city, from Halifax one night, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. We were the Winnipeg half hour every Thursday. That's the show that was big in our career because we got a chance to develop our songwriting and doing new music on that show. We were first a guest on the show with Chad Allen as the host, and it became that we then became the hosts of the show. It just we kind of took it over.
Did
Well, I'll give you a quote from Larry Brown, who was the producer at the time of the television show. He said, "When I met the Guess Who, we would tell them what they would play every week, as far as we would copy songs from the hit parade of that week." He said, "By the end of the show, they were telling me what they would play."
That's nice.
Yeah.
That is
I
very
mean,
nice.
it was a powerful tool for us because we had just come back from a horrendous trip to England, where we were supposed to get a record deal and a tour, and it just fell through. So we came back a great deal of money at that time, in the hole, and the TV show and playing live in and around Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Ontario, which you couldn't go very far if you had a TV show, on Thursday. That saved us, and it allowed the band to progress. And songs like These Eyes,
Mm,
Undone, and No Time came out of that TV show.
very cool. And then I was just kind of curious what thoughts you have. And I didn't know about any of this. Again, I was kind of reading this on Wikipedia again, not knowing if it's all accurate. But there was this, from the perception of my reading, like this Jim Cale tribute era that didn't really entail uh, anyone from the band, or almost no one from the band at times. And maybe you had participated in it, part of it, that era.
I was asked to become, it was going to be Kurt Winter, who was obviously a big part of the Guess Who, Donnie McDougall, who was also a part of the Guess Who, Jim Cale, and myself. At that point, I don't think I was ready to go out with the band, and so I bowed out. So there really was, in the beginning, some members of the band in that band, and Randy and Burton and I signed a little piece of paper allowing Jim to go out and use the name. I don't think that's told very often, but I don't think we ever thought that the band would ever go on in any form. So that's why we did that.
Were there some good times during all of that, or?
Well, yeah, I came back a couple of years later. I came back to the band, and yeah, there were some good times, and there were albums. I mean, if you go back and look, I think almost every iteration of the band had an album, and that's probably due to the fact that once I was in the band, I think Jim did one album with that group that I wasn't with for a brief year or two. They did All This for a Song was an album that they put out. But once I got in the band, back in the band, I always promoted the band trying to write and produce and record new material. So there's one album, I'm sure, with Terry Hattie on it, called Liberty. There's an album with Carl Dixon, or some recordings with Carl Dixon, and then when Derek Sharp got into the band, there's obviously we have a more rebirth of the recording and the creativity of the band, because Derek Sharp is an incredible talent. And I've said this before in interviews, I've been fortunate to be involved with such great musicians all my life, and songwriters, Randy Burton, Kurt Winter, Dominique Troiano. And I never thought I'd, at this late date in my life, find another person who was of that magnitude.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, really, to think about.
Well, you got the album, then you'll understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they sound top notch. You guys sound top notch. Where is the rest of the band? Are any of them in Florida, or are they all there?
You mentioned Foreigner. Well, Michael Sterto, our guitar player and singer as well, he played with Lou Gramm for many years.
Ah,
so he lives in Nashville.
Okay.
Leonard Shaw, our keyboard player, had been with the band for 30 years, lives in Winnipeg. Derek Sharp lives just north of Toronto. Michael Devon on the album, I think he was living in Los Angeles at the time. Then he moved to Maine, and I think he may be in Florida now. But he's since left the band and gone to a group called the Dead Daisies.
Mm-hmm.
So we've unfortunately had to replace Michael Devon, who was really on the last two albums. He was on The Future Is What It Used to Be, and also on this one. And it wasn't something we were all that happy about, but things happen in the music industry. And so our new bass player is going to be Greg Smith, who played with he's played with Tommy James and the Shondells, and the guy from Detroit with the bow and arrow. My mind has gone blank.
Ted Nugent.
Ted Nugent I think played 10 years with Ted.
Wow.
And it's funny because we've done many shows with Ted. I went blank for a second. It's old age, short-term memory. So we have great players in the band. And the greatest thing that we have is Derek, because he's kind of the conduit for everything. He's doing so much producing and writing and song. He writes amazing songs, and he does write amazing background vocal parts. I'm always blown away when I hear a new song, which I just listened to before this podcast. And I shake my head and go, wow, this is just incredible. So
how lucky for you all that you're together.
Yeah, they're all great guys, and it's like I'm going out in next week and I can't wait to see all of them. It's one of those things where when we're apart, it's kind of like something is missing. So,
that's nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
Do people, musicians, younger or otherwise, ever ask you for advice? And if so, is there any most common advice that you give them?
Yeah. I mean, I was like 4 years old when I played my first professional show. And so I have a lot of history behind my musical career. And unfortunately, I wish I had the formal schooling that many great drummers of today have. I didn't have access to that in Winnipeg and in my situation. But the best thing to do is play and listen to as much different kinds of music that you can, learn how to play, get as much education on your instrument and even on other instruments. I wish I had taken piano many times. And then after you learn to play and understand and love all kinds of music, then you can decide to specialize, whether it's jazz or classical. Like I played a one season with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra during my career, so I have a great love of classical music.
Wow, that's cool. That's quite the diversification.
Yeah, and of course, when I started playing in 1949, uh, there was no rock; it was just jazz and big band.
Oh, so
So,
that's your kind of your roots, eh?
well, if you listen to my drumming, you hear it all over the place.
I'm gonna listen to some of the early Guess Who then with that here.
Well, Undone is a good example, but you got to listen to some of the album cuts that were never ever played live. So
Okay. I'll check that out. That's fun to know. And okay, so we're almost out of time, but I guess I'd like to ask you what you're looking forward to in the coming months.
the next album, obviously, I mean, it's so exciting creating new music and both for the band. I mean, because I think older bands, classic bands don't have enough uh, stimulation in that area. They get to play their old stuff and this and that, but very few get to do new material. It's so good for the soul to do that, and for your just your creativity. So I look forward to that. And the next most important thing about that new material is when you play it for people, their reaction. That tells the whole tale.
Yeah, that's so cool, and you're right. I know that life and business and all kinds of weird things can get in the way for bands, but it's amazing that you guys have are doing yet another album. When are you? If you were to make a prediction, when do you think the next one will be out?
I think tracking will start in December.
How fun! Will you use the same studio?
That would be what I understand now. I mean, there's extenuating. We live in so many different places, that it's a little bit difficult, but I mean, we are already compiling the material and listening to it in a demo form. So that's the first step, and then the next step is to actually go, and we never really rehearsed for that album that you're listening to.
Oh wow!
We actually rehearsed at sound checks for live gigs.
I was going to ask you on the gigs that you're doing now. Are you guys kind of at a stage where you're able at this like this year where you just show up, do the gigs, or is there any prep? You got a new bass player coming? Are you having to rehearse a little bit?
Yeah, we again we do it on the fly at sound checks. So it's not, but I mean the people that we are, you notice the band has gone from a Canadian band to Canadian American. We even had Rudy Sarzo in the band, who obviously is a Latino
Uh-huh.
from Miami, who's just a wonderful guy, great player, and a wonderful friend. One of my greatest people to meet in my life.
How
Uh,
cool.
but we are now kind of more of in the beginning. We used to get all our members from Winnipeg when we were changing. Then we started getting a few from Toronto. Now we're kind of getting them from wherever the best person comes from.
That's cool. Well, you're so busy. I can see that you have the ability.
I'm always of the mind, let's get better. If we're making a change, let's get better. Let's not go anywhere backwards. We want to go higher. So
Yeah, I can see why you would handle it that way. So that's really cool. Well, Gary, I know you're about out of time. They're going to drag you away any second. So thank you so much for coming on to speak with me. It was a real honor.
great questions.
I hope so. I really hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this business and in this band since 1962, and you get a lot of different questions where you go, what? But any case, it's nice to have good questions, because it's easier for me to be able to expound on them.
Yeah, well, I always hope it's interesting and fun for my guests, and I hope it was for you today. It really was for me.
Yeah, it was great, really good, really one of my favorites so far this year.
All right, man. Well, hey, good luck on the tour and the album, and I hope that we get to talk again someday soon. It was really lovely meeting you.
Adios.
This episode was powered by Podcast Startup. If you feel you need a little help with that podcast you're contemplating, Podcast Startup may be just the thing for you. Podcast Startup is a program designed for new podcasters. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. It's commitment. A lack of planning and misaligned expectations are a recipe for fast burnout and fade out for podcasters. This is exactly the kind of thing that Podcast Startup was designed to help you with. If you're intrigued, if you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to learn more and to receive free podcast startup tips from yours truly. Thank you for listening. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you love this podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the many ways of showing your love and support. Your support does indeed equal love. The series music you heard in this episode is New Gods Part 2 by yours truly. Find links for all the places to hear the full version with vocals by yours truly at rabonzo.com. If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle has amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, plus tools that can capture detailed fan data for you. Try it at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, that's ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Find links for all the people and things talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, love, and a whole lot of gratitude.